Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Dragons Dawn of New Riders. This game takes place in the How to Train Your Dragon universe. I believe it takes place after the events of How to Train Your Dragon 3 because Hiccup's mom is in the game, or at least she's mentioned. You don't really see her. I believe his mom was introduced in the third one if I'm not mistaken. I've only seen each one of the movies once, so I'm not too well versed in the Dragon universe. This game introduces two new characters, a human who is nicknamed Scribbler, and a dragon named Patch. You are a character who wakes up with amnesia, so you don't really remember what your name is, why you're there, what's going on, and so when Hiccup and Toothless discover you, they nickname you Scribbler because you have like a journal full of scribbled notes. Next to you is a dragon egg that hatches into a dragon with multiple elemental properties, and so Scribbler calls him a Chimeragon, which I thought was pretty clever, and they named him Patch because he's like a patchwork dragon. It's just the charming nature of what you would expect from How to Train Your Dragon. I always like the How to Train Your Dragon universe. I just like how the dragons themselves they're basically just dogs, right? With their tongues always loll out of their mouth. So likable. So what is the gameplay like? Well, you can play as each character, both Scribbler and Patch. Scribbler more acts like your melee attacker. You have your basic attack. You can charge up your basic attack to do a stronger attack. You have a roll, which is always fun to do. You have a run. Other than that, it is pretty simple as far as combat goes. And then you can switch between Scribbler and Patch acts more like a ranged character. He doesn't really do too much damage though. Most of the time I was playing as Scribbler. Patch, he earns different elemental attacks as you progress through the game, and they kind of help with puzzles and stuff, but he really didn't help much during combat. While you are playing as one character, the other character is controlled by an AI, and the AI is pretty dumb, so he's not really going to be helping you that much, and also he'll be taking a lot of damage on his own. It's not like he's dodging attacks or anything like that, and each character has their own independent health, so if you do want to keep your teammate healthy, you will have to protect them pretty significantly because they won't be able to protect themselves. And don't really think that you can just sit back and let your team member do all the work because they don't attack that often either. In fact, I feel like the partner just gets in the way most of the time because you can't run through the partner or enemies. So it would happen quite often where I would be fighting this horde of dragon trappers. These are like the bad guys. And then my teammate would come right up next to me and I just couldn't move anywhere because you can't like squeeze through the guys or anything like that, so you just got stuck until you defeated one of the enemies. Also, when you are traversing, there are certain areas where it is just like the skinny piece of land that you have to go across, and if you want to turn around and your partner is right behind you, you're going to have to go all the way up and then give yourself area to go around your teammate or try and push them backwards. There are some light, very, very light RPG mechanics. It's kind of like kids' first RPG, I want to say. There's some very light gear. There isn't that many options as far as gear goes. You can only craft like 2 different of each piece. I think there's a helmet, a chest piece, and then maybe a shield if I'm not mistaken, but you can only get like a potential of 3 different types of each of these equipments, so don't expect to be doing a lot of stat managing here. You can also upgrade your different weapons as you progress through the game. You unlock 2 more different weapons for Scribbler, and these are basically just varying attack speeds to your liking. You got your big heavy hammer that attacks really slow but does a ton of damage, or you have your quick pace sword, just whatever your preference of attack speed is. You can also craft, that's really how you purchase this gear or how you upgrade your weapons, is you collect enough resources throughout the world in order to upgrade these pieces of equipment or craft them. You can also get herbs, and this is what you use to craft potions. There's mostly I just use it for health potions, but you can also craft different buffs, things that make you like attack faster or do more damage or give you more defense. These are just temporary effects, however. So I didn't really bother with them. It's not like the combat itself was too difficult. I want to just say that I understand that this game isn't necessarily for me. It is more for like the tween audience, you know, like 10-year-old me would have been all about this. And I think it is simple enough to grasp that a 10, 11, 12-year-old could grasp this and be able to play it on their own all the way through to the end credits. So when I talk about these things, I'm not necessarily complaining about them. I'm just stating how a 28-year-old is intercepting this game. Camera view, all that, it kind of reminded me of a very simple 2D Zelda. Usually, you know what, as far as game length goes and dungeons, there's only 3 dungeons total. It is like the intro sequence to most 2D Zeldas before you like pull out the Master Sword or whatever. It's where you're getting like the 3 amulets. Expect about that type of game length. There's not a whole lot of exploration either. It basically takes place on an ocean full of different islands. And most of the islands, they're just side islands that have additional little challenges, little puzzles and things to get extra resources in order to upgrade your weapons. These side islands aren't necessary in completing the game. There's only like 3 main islands. Like I said, there's only 3 dungeons. So you will land on a big island, you'll progress up to the dungeon, and it is a fairly linear path. Just expect a little balance of puzzles and some combat until you progress your way to the dungeon. There are a couple small short pathways off the beaten path that will give you more herbs and resources, but like I said, you're just mainly going towards the dungeon. And then when you enter the dungeon, picture like a fairly simplistic Zelda dungeon where there is some exploration. You have a map. If you do explore all of it, then you can get extra health. There is even a little indicator on how many of the chests that you got in the dungeon. So if you are a completionist, then you will be able to see how many you have left to the dungeon before you fight the main boss. It's not like you're getting any key items though in order for you to progress like a Zelda. Don't expect anything like that. I feel like even comparing it to a 2D Zelda game might be overstating it a little bit. So then you fight the final boss of the dungeon, and this is where your dragon Patch unlocks a new elemental attack, which is always exciting. He even grows up a little bit, looks a little cooler. And visually, it is kind of fun because when you upgrade your weapon, it gets like a different elemental effect. So like if you upgrade your sword all the way, then it becomes like this cool frost sword. But it's a kind of shorter game, so don't expect a ton of enemy variety here or environment variety. I think that you just fight through the regular woods and then this icy snowy place and then like these woods, but they take place during the fall. So there's not too much variety in terms of environment and enemies. Most of the time you'll be fighting dragon trappers, just regular Viking looking dudes. Visually, it doesn't look bad. Like I wouldn't cringe when I look at it or anything. It's just a fairly simplistic video game aesthetic. It's like fairly obvious that you're playing a How to Train Your Dragons video game. The characters themselves don't look proportionally correct as their counterparts in the movie. They kind of look like a mobile game aesthetic. Like if you were playing Clash of Clans, they kind of look like that simplistic blocky look. But the environment itself is fine. I'd say it looked alright even. Sometimes during the combat I would get a status effect applied to me. Something like you are electrified or you are getting burned or you get knocked down, and your character will just freeze for a while because he's being affected by this status. And I want to say it takes about 10 seconds to get back up. Maybe not that long, but it really felt like 10 seconds. And these status effects would happen more often than I would like to admit. Admittedly, there are always ways to dodge these attacks if you don't want to just brute force your way through. The combat does take a little bit of thought. It's not just button mashing. You can block with your shield, you can dodge, that kind of stuff. There's even certain enemies have like unblockable attacks that you have to react with your dodge. So there is a little bit of thought put into it, but if you aren't paying perfect attention, you will be hit by these status effects more often than I would prefer. Traversing around the world is pretty fun. You get to fly on your dragon Patch. After the first or second time traversing across this ocean on Patch, flying around with him, it got a little old. I kind of would prefer for a level select at that point, but I guess the novelty of it was pretty fun, being able to fly on your dragon. Like I said, 10-year-old me would have loved this game. There's not any voice acting. It's kind of what you would expect from an older game, where you would get this speech bubble and your character will just make this little noise like, huh? Oh, but he won't like actually say anything. It's just reading the text box, and then the little sound corresponds with what your character is saying. I did notice this game-breaking bug, and it happened to me a couple of times, where if I would pause the game, sometimes the pause menu wouldn't show up, but it would make the sounds, like when I press the buttons, it would make sounds like I was navigating through the pause menu, but the pause menu wouldn't come up, and I couldn't exit out of it when I hit B or start or anything like that. It just thought that I had the game paused, so I would have to exit out and re-enter the game at that point. But yeah, it took me maybe about 4 hours. I did do all of these side islands, but that's not saying much because there's only 5 or 6 side islands total, and then the 3 main dungeons. It took me about 4 hours, but it isn't even a full price game. I think full price this is for $20, so it's not asking for a ton of money for what it has to offer here. You definitely could do a lot worse when playing a game based off of a movie series license. I think they did actually try here, and the story itself is pretty interesting. I was pretty engaged the whole time. I wanted to see what happened to Patch. I wanted to see what happened to Scribbler, what their whole past was. I wanted to see how the story played out with the main antagonist, who is mind controlling these dragons. Basically, she like attaches these orbs to them, and it makes them evil until you destroy the orbs, and then you free the dragons. So there is still some combat against the dragons, but we all know the dragons are good, so we're just trying to free them from the mind control. And then after you rescue these dragons, you can summon them in combat, and they just do this like little overhead attack, which is visually pretty fun and pretty effective in combat. I do have one gripe, however, and I just hate when any form of media does this. Books, movies, video games, where they think that they're going to make a sequel, but they never do. So it's just a cop-out not to conclude the story, not to give us the answers that we're looking for, and this game definitely does that. It doesn't answer anything about Scribbler's past. It just kind of trails off like they were going to make a sequel. I highly doubt that will ever happen, however. And so that story, the whole story that kept me pretty engaged, just kind of flopped over, and I guess I'll just have to make up my own ending. I think I will give this game a 2 out of 5, but don't get me wrong, it's nothing awful. Well guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Dragons, Dawn of the New Riders, or How to Train Your Dragon, and I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. That's it for me though. I'll talk to you later. Bye!